Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Politics Matters podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Jakubowski, and I'd like to say thank you for listening. And today we're going to be talking about, obviously, the Supreme Court's leaked decision on the Roe v. Wade case and what that means for the midterms. So we're going to get right into it. Nothing special today. This is the first podcast in a while I haven't had a guest on, so go check on the other podcasts I have uploaded the past few weeks. I had Evans Grimshaw, Political Election Projections, and Arthur Garden on the show. I enjoyed all those episodes. They were all fantastic. So if you are new to the show and haven't listened yet, go check those episodes out. And I think that's it for the intro. Today we're going to be talking about, obviously, what this decision means for the midterms. Specifically at the congressional level. I know that these have implications at the, local level, state legislative level, and the gubernatorial level, but I wanted to focus on the highest up thing, I suppose, which is the House and the Senate, and those are, currently the things I am most invested in right now, because I think the Senate map's really interesting. Obviously, the House map, I'm always fascinated by the House map. I would like to talk about that too, but we're going to be starting off with the Senate because, obviously, each race here is just massive because there are so little battlegrounds, because in 2020 and 2018 there were, a good amount of states that were contested, and this year there are only really 4 or 5 depending on who you ask, so I would most certainly say that the Senate map isn't going to change as much as we would have seen in the past, mostly because of how polarized our country is, but also kind of a factor of that is we have less competitive races than we usually have, but, I think that will, just kind of sum up what we're doing here. So, there are a few states that I changed my ratings for based on this decision, all of which would be in favor of the Democratic Party. The overall makeup of my prediction didn't change. I'm still at 48 seats for the Democrats, but the 52 Republican seats went from all decently strong to all a little weaker now. So, Pennsylvania went from likely Republican to lean Republican. Arizona went from lean Republican to tilt Republican. New Hampshire went from lean Democrat to likely Democrat. And then Ohio went from safe Republican to likely Republican. And that is less because, obviously the leak on the Roe v. Wade case doesn't hurt the Democratic Party in Ohio, but it's more because J.D. Vance got the GOP nomination. He wasn't really their strongest candidate. In my eyes, I really think that Matt Dolan would have been a better option for them. Also, I'm just going to, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to take a victory lap for that because, yes, I know I'm being arrogant here, but, I am so proud that I finally got a primary because I was on a losing streak with primaries. I had, in 2020, back in August, I had Nina Turner beating Shontel Brown in that primary, and then Shontel Brown came from behind and won. In 2021, I'll admit, and I was pretty surprised by New Jersey and Virginia. I had McAuliffe winning Virginia by 2. He lost by 2, so that was I think the worst night of my election prediction career. And then I also had Murphy winning New Jersey by I think 12, and he only won by 3 or 4. So it wasn't that wasn't a great night for me. We haven't really had a ton of elections since then, except for the Texas primaries, which obviously weren't too hard to predict. But that Ohio primary was really really contested, and I'm glad that I was able to, I'm glad I was able to get it. So, I am very happy with that. I'm glad I got the top 5 in order. I had Vance, Mandel, Dolan, Gibbons, and then Timken, and that's what happened. I was, laughed out on Twitter for saying Dolan was going to come in 3rd, and he ended up coming in 3rd. And then I also am glad that I got the margin of victory for Vance over Mandel, right? So, very happy with that. Will flex that a lot, but just wanted to get that out because it was a relief to get one of those. Anyways, so Ohio is this first state I wanted. I guess it's the state where we'll start because I was talking about it. I don't think this changes too much. I still think J.D. Vance beats Tim Ryan. All I really see changing is that I think this Dolan losing that primary and then Roe v. Wade getting overturned, all that really does is exacerbate the GOP's losses in the suburbs because, as we all know, Dolan was the candidate of the suburbs. He won 3 counties, and they were I'm forgetting the name of one of them, but it was the one next to Cuyahoga, home of Cleveland. So you got Cuyahoga, the one next to Cuyahoga, and then obviously Franklin, which is the home of Columbus. So he did well in the urban areas and the suburbs, and that was really it. And then, then that it wasn't too great. That's why he lost the primary. And so as a result of this, you're gonna see these suburbanites, I think, especially in Columbus, because that's Columbus and the Shaker Heights, Summit County, Eastern Cuyahoga area are the two most college-educated areas in Ohio, as well as northern Cincinnati, but I think to a lesser scale. But those are the three most college-educated areas in Ohio. And Dolan, I think, would have done well with them, and Van Chist isn't their guy. I think a lot of them will cross over to Tim Ryan, and, not as much as there would have been in 2020 or 2024 even, maybe. But, I just am not high on J.D. Vance, because Ohio is a state that does fluctuate a lot. In 2014, we saw a lot of big Republican victories. In 2016, the GOP did very well there. And then in 2018, Sherrod Brown goes and wins that Senate race. And I get it, Sherrod Brown, but I think you can make an argument that in 2018, the Democrats still did well other than Sherrod Brown because of Richard Cordray, who only lost the governor's race by 4%. He was very much competitive. And if Tim Ryan were to lose this Senate race by 4%, I think that would be considered a win for the Democratic Party, because they'd probably be doing well otherwise. And so if J.D. Vance runs the campaign that I expect him to run, which is one of mediocrity and one that doesn't really energize people the way people think it will, I do think it'll be less than a 10-point margin of victory for him. He'll still win. He's still fairly safe, but I think it's a bit smaller. Now moving on to Wisconsin and North Carolina, these are kind of the same. They're kind of the same thing. They're both going to go to the GOP by around 5. On a good night, they'll go to the GOP. On a good night for the Democratic Party. On a good night for the Democratic Party, they'll go, maybe 2 or 3 point margin of victory for the Republicans. But on a bad night, it could get to 6 or 7. And I'm, expecting it to be closer to a bad night than to a good night. So GOP plus 5 is my prediction for both these races. Wisconsin, I wouldn't be surprised if it's GOP plus 6 just because of how bad. I'm convinced the Democrats have no hope for unseating Ron Johnson because they're just too in shock after 2016. Because in 2016 he's supposed to lose, and he was down in the polls, and then he comes and beats Russ Feingold by 3 points, which was a pretty surprising victory, especially considering running ahead of Trump, because Trump was supposed to lose Wisconsin anyways, and so was Johnson, and then they win it by 3%. So. That I still imagine that has this lingering effect on Democrats, and they're probably not happy about that, obviously. But 2022 just doesn't seem like their year. Now, I'm not saying that any year will be good for Democrats in Wisconsin, but I do want to say that the Democratic Party is just not. They're not gaining the traction that they should be gaining at this stage. You'd expect, because in Pennsylvania or Ohio or even North Carolina, we're seeing some decent polling for Democrats. We're seeing, some hope for them that they're not favored, but they have a chance, right? And from Wisconsin, we're hearing nothing. We're seeing these candidates, whether it's Adam Murphy or Sarah Godlewski, Alex Lazary, and then you've got, obviously, Mandela Barnes is probably going to win that primary anyways. It's just to me, I don't see I don't really see the Democratic Party pulling or consolidating or pulling in strength. And, Ron Johnson, with him going to lead this GOP banner in Wisconsin, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins by 5, 6, or maybe even 7 based on the campaign the Democrats are running, because they're treating Mandela Barnes like he's the presumptive nominee, which he probably is. He'll probably win this primary by a comfortable amount. And what that means is that it'll be him versus Ron Johnson, and I think he gets slaughtered. I don't see this being a race that's even close, because Ron Johnson is the lieutenant governor. He hasn't, he holds a statewide office, but he hasn't won that. It's Tony Evers who's won that position, and so some Wisconsinites, I'm sure, know his name vaguely as their lieutenant governor, but they didn't vote for him. He was just on the ticket when Tony Evers won. So, if they got Tony Evers to run in this race, he still wouldn't be favored, but I'd at least be giving him more credit than I'm giving Mandela Barnes here. And so that's one thing. Another thing is that Mandela Barnes is running, it's generous of me to say he's running a campaign because I haven't seen any of it. And, look, I don't live in Wisconsin, but I also don't live in Ohio, and I can see what Tim Ryan's doing. I don't live in Pennsylvania, I can see what John Fetterman's doing. I don't live in Georgia, and I can see what Raphael Warnock's doing. Same for Republicans. For example, I don't live in Arizona, but I can see what Brnovich and Masters are doing. I don't live in Georgia, but I can see what Herschel Walker's doing. I don't live in Pennsylvania, but I can definitely see what Mehmet Oz is doing and what David McCormick is trying to do, but failing to do. And, the question for the Democrats in Wisconsin is just, guys, I doubt you guys are listening to this podcast, but, are you trying? Genuinely. And, if the Democrats in Wisconsin aren't trying, I get that, because this is not a winnable race for them, okay? I am fine with them admitting that, but the Democrats, if they genuinely pull out of Wisconsin, I will not be mad, because there are no competitive House races, the state legislature is gone, and so Tony Evers, that they might say, is it worth saving Tony Evers, but if they're trying to save Tony Evers, they should invest in Tony Evers' race, not in a Senate race that's going to run behind him by 5 points no matter what. And so, I do want to say that the Democrats in Wisconsin don't seem like they're trying. And if they are, they're doing a very bad job. And I hate to say that because I'm a Democrat and I want to win the Senate race, right? But, I'm being real here. And, I don't see it. I just don't see what the goal for this would be. And I don't see what any Democrat would be, what they're trying to do here. I just don't see this going on. And, I would like to be proven wrong within the next 2 months, because that's whenever primary day is. I think it's in June. But, yeah, I don't know. I think Wisconsin, even if there would have been a polling bump, you'd think that if Roe v. Wade had any effect, we'd be seeing something out of Wisconsin, but we're not. North Carolina's a little different. I think the Democrats, they were going to lose. Probably by a little less than they lose Wisconsin, even though it's still a Trump state and Wisconsin's a Biden state, so great job, Wisconsin Democrats. Doing great, guys. But Sherry Beasley's a better candidate than Mandela Barnes is. She is she actually holds a statewide office, or she held one in 2020. She actually did run ahead of Biden. She lost, I think, her seat by literally 1,000 votes, and what I think is, 0.2% or something like that, or maybe even one. Actually, let me pull it up. Yeah, Sherry Beasley lost a squeaker. She lost it by quite literally 450. Oh, no, now I feel bad for her. She lost it by 450 votes. She got 49.996% of the vote to Paul Martin Newby. Ooh, that's got to be tough. I mean, Sherry Beasley, that's a really, really difficult pill to swallow if you're Sherry Beasley, but she's running for Senate now anyways. And unfortunately for her, I think she loses. But I just wanted to say that I didn't know the margin off the top of my head, so apologies for being unprofessional and Googling that. But she ran ahead of Biden. She's a good candidate, better than Mandela Barnes, but she still loses because it's North Carolina, and because unless she gets a block turnout through the stratosphere, I don't see a path to victory for her. Then you got Pennsylvania as the next tier of seats for the GOP. The GOP, so I will pose this as a question, and I know there's no, if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, there's no, direct area in which you can comment, but I will pose this as a question. Where's the hype around John Fetterman? Why do people still have him favored? I think the consensus is that he's losing right now, but on 40% of the predictions that I see or that I watch or whatever, Pennsylvania's like a light blue, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is a red wave year. I get Roe v. Wade was just overturned, that helps the Democrats, but it doesn't change the dynamic of the year. It doesn't fundamentally reshape American politics. It's not like overnight swing voters went from being Republicans to Democrats like they did in 2020. That's not the way this works, but it's Pennsylvania. It's a Biden state. It's a state that the Democrats did very well in 2018. And, Pennsylvania is actually quite friendly to Democrats at the midterm level, because in 2014 they did win a governor's race there. Again, it was against Tom Corbett, so it wasn't, take it with a grain of salt. It's like beating a kindergartner in a game of basketball. But, are we really going to discount the fact that Pennsylvania is still only Biden +1? It's still a state that is trending red in the future. It'll be interesting, but I think next 4 or 6 years it'll be getting more Republican. Like, until the Democrats can max out the Philly suburbs and until we fully see the effects of the migration out of rural Pennsylvania, I think Pennsylvania stays red. I think, unless by some miracle Sherrod Brown and Amy Klobuchar gets the 2024 nomination, I think that they lose Pennsylvania at the presidential level. But yeah, so Fetterman is helped by this a little bit. He's helped. So the thing with Fetterman is that I think that his candidacy is based on not his candidacy, but the people who think he's electable and that he will win this race. I think it's based on a flawed premise. And so the argument that I've been hearing from Fetterman for a year now is that he's big dude. He looks like, this is. It sounds too like in people's heads it sounds okay, but I think it's pretty elitist when you say it and say it. So I'm going to say it because I think it's stupid, and that's why I'm calling it out. So I don't believe this, but this is the argument I think among a lot of people. And this isn't to be rude to Fetterman supporters, people who think he wins this race, but I think that there's this assumption that is flawed, in that I think people need to do better on if they're thinking this or saying this. The assumptions that Fetterman, if those who don't know, he's a big man. He's a very strong, he's a bald, strong dude who wears work clothes. He as the kids say, he pimps the blue collar. And so if we're being real here, there are people who think that since he's this big, blunt talking guy who walks around in clothes that are associated with middle class jobs in Western Pennsylvania, there are people who think that he's going to magically get back these voters because he talks like them, he acts like them, he dresses like them, and cool. I've listened to John Fetterman talk. Like, I know how he talks, I know who he is, and I respect him. But the assumption that because he acts or talks or behaves is subjective, but behaves with air quotes like these people makes you think you can get back Republicans that have been voting Republican since 2016. To me is ludicrous. To me, it's based on condescension. It's based on a very flawed belief. Because if that was the truth, we would have seen Richard Ojeda winning the West Virginia House race he ran in. And look, I get that he overperformed, but that was it because of the blue wave and that he ran a good campaign, or just because of the way he behaved? Yeah. So if Fetterman runs a good campaign, he can win. This isn't a race he's guaranteed to lose. But I just the argument for him is that he gets back these voters. But I think the voters are gone no matter what. And I think that if the Democrats in Pennsylvania were smart, they'd be asking him to try to win suburbanites, try to consolidate the coalition, try to keep out, because he doesn't need to gain Republican voters that are turning out at lower rates every year. He needs to hold on to the voters, to people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And if he does that, he'll win the race easily. But that's easier said than done, obviously. So he needs to be consolidating support in suburban Pittsburgh and, of course, Chester, Montgomery, Bucks County. And then once we get there, I think you're cooking. But for now, still got Fetterman losing. Georgia is on Twitter. I said this. I think it's the toss-up of all toss-ups, and I got a mix of replies. I think some people were saying that now Warnock is outright favored because of Roe v. Wade, and that's a fair assessment, I guess. And then there are people who said that Walker's favored, and that I got a quote tweet. I won't say the user, but I think they follow me. I don't follow them though, but I got a quote tweet from someone who was telling me that I was biased because it should be obviously it's likely that Herschel Walker's going to win this race and the Republicans are going to sweep Georgia and win by 8%. And I was like, okay, I will. If you think that Herschel Walker wins this race by 8%, then I go to Bridge in Brooklyn to sell you, because that would be a return to 2014, and 2022 might be a red wave, but it will not be 2014. So just gonna put that out there. If Herschel Walker wins by 8, you can block me on Twitter, you can unsubscribe for this podcast, you can do whatever you want, but I don't think that's gonna happen personally. Although maybe I'm a biased lib because I have the GOP at 52 Senate seats and getting the majority, and I should have them at a super majority, right? But whatever. Now, on a more serious note, I think this race is competitive. It's so it could just so go either way. Like, if we were in an environment that was even a point more favorable to Democrats than I think it is now, I'd move it to lean D. But I just don't know where we are. Like if you gave me the national environment and you said it's R+3, I think the Democrats narrowly hold on to Georgia. But if you give the national environment and you say it's R+4 or R+5, I think the Republicans narrowly hold on to it. Like, it's just, I just need to know the national environment before I make these predictions. And I know I can predict the national environment, but, Georgia, we don't know how it'll fluctuate. We don't know whether it'll trend a lot to the left or whether it'll get more Republican as a result of defying trends. Because Georgia's been trending blue for, a few decades now, right? Or I'd say since the early 2000s. And we're now seeing the results of these trends in the North Atlanta suburbs. And so, the argument for the Democrats is that these trends will continue. They're going to happen. Obviously, hypothetically, the term is that the trends have been manifesting for another year and a half since the election because, it's already been a year and a half since the 2020 election. That's crazy. I mean, wow. Okay. Anyways, since we last, I guess I should say a year and a third ago in 2020, in the runoffs in 2021, since it's been a while since we had that last election, that means that another, hundreds of thousands of people have moved into Georgia. Most of them are Democrats, and so the argument's that since these people are moving from New York and California, all south to Georgia or south to North Carolina or south to Miami, Florida, I guess, but Miami specifically. No, I do not think Miami's a state. I'm not that bad at geography, even though I'm American. The argument for Democrats is that these trends are just here to stay, and that there will be a Republican and national environment, which will make the margin closer, but the Democrats are still favored to win here. Now, the GOP argument, I think, is a bit more realistic. I think it's a bit less wish-casty, but there are problems with it, too. So the GOP argument is that Georgia Georgia voted 4 points to the right of the country, and even if it trends blue a little bit, it won't trend, like, a ton blue. And for it to vote blue, you need to see that the Democrats winning the national environment by 4, or a significant left trend in Georgia. And, the people who think the Republicans are winning Georgia probably think the national environment's R+4 or R+5. And for the Democrats to win Georgia, they need to outperform the national environment by 4 or 5% in the state. So, it's possible. The Democrats outperform the national environment by 4 or 5%, I think. It's plausible, but I don't think it's most likely, especially in a state like Georgia. And, in Nevada, it's more likely than Georgia, but I think it's possible, but not likely. So I think that's it for Georgia. I've got the GOP as the narrowest of favorites right there, like favored by, like, if you flipped a coin 100 times, the GOP would probably win at 51 or 52 of those times. That's just how close I am on this. This is about as indecisive as I've been on a race in a while because, if you think the Democrats win this race by a point, if you think the Republicans win the race by a point, I respect both those points equally, But for now, because the national environment, just out of an abundance of caution for me personally, I'll give the race to the GOP, but, it is really close. It's the tiltiest of tilt R's. It is a shade of pink, lighter than, what's a light pink? I don't know. It is, but it's a very light shade of pink. It is by no means dark red, or even in the light reddish column. So, Arizona is another state that I think the GOP holds. I moved it from lean Republican down to tilt Republican. We don't know who's gonna win that primary yet. There's this guy named Jim Lamone who's been surging as of late, and I don't know anything about him other than weirdly Trafalgar polls have had him in a second or first place in the primary, which I don't buy, but I haven't followed the primary too much. But I'm just gonna assume, for the sake of this video or the podcast, I don't even know what I'm doing right now, that it'll be Blake Masters. I could see Mark Brnovich winning, but I'm getting so many mixed signals from this race, and we're seeing these surges for Jim Lamone, and then we're getting these random bursts of enthusiasm or optimism from the Brnovich and Masters camp, so I'll just assume it's Masters because he's more similar to J.D. Vance. Brnovich is more of a Dolan. But Masters being the nominee helps the Democrats a little bit because Brnovich would probably be favored by a little. Like, Brnovich probably wins by 4, and Masters probably wins by a point or 2. I still think they both win again. I still think they're both favored against Mark Kelly just because Arizona is so reliant on Democrats doing well with Hispanics and with suburbanites simultaneously that I just think it's just too much for Kelly, and so that's why he loses. But again, I wouldn't be stunned or anything if Kelly pulls it off. I just wouldn't, I'd just be, I guess, pleasantly surprised because I think he's gonna lose. So last you got Nevada. And so Nevada could be an outlier. We're going to see a year that's going to be quite good for Republicans and where most areas are going to swing towards the GOP. But what people often forget is that, even in 2014, which was a red wave, or 2018, which was a blue wave, areas still will swing a certain way regardless of national environment. If trends are strong enough, there will still be, in 2018, there were still areas that swung Republican. They were mostly, working class rural areas or whatever, but they still swung Republican. And in 2014, there were still some suburbs that did swing towards Democrats. So, because of this global realignment, we're seeing. I still think there are going to be states that do swing towards Democrats, despite expectations. And so, I do think that Nevada stays Democrat because Nevada is a fiercely libertarian state. If we look at the percentage of Nevadans who are pro-choice, it greatly outruns the share of the vote that Democrats usually get there because they usually win by about 2 or 3%. And in Nevada, if you take a look at when asked if they're pro-life or pro-choice, 62% of Nevadans are pro-choice. So that's pretty, it's a pretty resounding number. But Nevada's a unique state. It's what I call a weird state, but I like it. I like weird. And so there are a lot of people who vote Republican, but are more libertarian on issues like gay marriage or on abortion. And actually, Nevada, there are a few counties in rural Nevada where I think prostitution is actually, don't demonetize this, YouTube, please, but where sex work is still legal and is accepted by the state, because obviously it happens in a lot of places, but in rural Nevada it's actually literally legal and you can do it in these regions. And so Nevada's it's a goofy state. But it likes its libertarianism, and I think that goes a long way with this ruling. And I think that you're going to see decreased rural turnout, decreased rural Hispanic turnout, which is Trump anyways. You'll see the suburbs continue to swing left, even though it is a Biden midterm. And then I think you will see, because Biden didn't really campaign in Nevada. He thought he had it in the bag, and he won it by 2.4, so he still won it. It didn't really matter. But had he campaigned, I think he would have done a lot better. And COVID hit Vegas really hard. It shut down universities, and that hurt Democrats in Nevada. So 2020 was Nevada was one of the key states in 2020 in which the Democrats could have done a lot better, and they didn't. And I think Cortez Masto just, if Biden won, if Biden actually campaigned in Nevada the way he did in Georgia or in Arizona or even Pennsylvania, and it was a D plus 5 or 6 state, I think we would be talking about this race it's a lean D race and not it's a toss up or tilt race. So I think that's I think Nevada's bluer than we think, and that's why Cortez Masto wins. So that's it. It's 48 Democratic seats in the Senate, 52 Republicans. We're now going to move on to the second segment of the show, in which I talk about the House, my current prediction. So I'll run you through it before we get started. I've got the Democrats at 201 seats, GOP at 220, and then you got 14 toss-ups. And so that would give the GOP an outright majority. I got to say, my House forecast hasn't really changed much because I just don't I don't know if I'm confident enough, because I got to get more polling, right? We got to see in 2 weeks from now where we're at, because the national environment I think has swung a bit towards the Republican Party. I have a friend who does who's better at this than I am, who does who does this stuff, he has a national environment model, and he texted me and he said that the GOP are now down to a 2-point lead in national environment, which is down from the 3 or 4% lead they had before. And so, A, I trust that person. B, I just think we're seeing a bit of a shift towards Democrats anyways. And so, as a result of that, you're probably looking at a national environment that's a little better for Democrats, in which they do flip a few House seats they wouldn't have won 2 weeks ago. But again, I don't know what those seats are specifically. So I've still got the GOP at 220 seats. They still have the majority in my book. But if we look at the seats that I have them narrowly winning, or that are seats in which they that are toss-ups, a lot of them are suburban seats trending towards the Democratic Party. A lot of them are seats I think the Democrats lose in 2022, but win back later. So you're looking at like your Washington 8s of the world, Virginia 2s, Virginia 7s, Ohio 1s, Michigan 3s. Just these seats that are college-educated seats that have been trending towards Democrats, but are still quite favorable to Republicans down ballot. So, I think I don't think there's too much to unpack here. Let's just run through this, okay? Democrats at 201 seats. I'll give them a few seats that I think they might win because of this. So, first of all, I'm pretty optimistic that they win Peter Meyer's seat. So that's the 3rd district of Michigan, and it's in Grand Rapids. It's a Biden plus 8 seat. It's trending blue so fast that even Joe Biden outperformed Gretchen Whitmer there, and Whitmer outperformed Biden, I think, 13 of the, or maybe 12 of the 14 congressional. There are 13 congressional districts. I think Whitmer outperformed Biden in 11 of the 13 districts, and Michigan 3rd is the one where she did the worst relative to Biden. And so, Michigan 3rd, I think, is the second that Peter Meyer loses that primary, I move it to lean Democrat, closer to likely than toss up at that point. So, I do think Peter Meyer loses this race, even if he gets the nomination, but it's closer than if it's his primary opponents. So that Michigan 3rd, I think, is the one off the board first. It's the one I single out the most. I currently got Virginia 2 as a toss-up, or as lean Republican, but I'd move it to toss-up if the Democrats, if Roe v. Wade does shift opinion in Virginia. But it wouldn't change anything. It would just move from lean Republican to toss-up, and I'll keep it as lean Republican for now. Virginia 7 would get more favorable to Democrats, but I still think they win it anyways. And then the 10th, which is Jennifer Wexton's seat, I think it'd go from likely to safety. So in Virginia, we'd see some movement, but it wouldn't change anything. The Democrats would probably win Ohio 1 because of this, because they'd probably be really gaining in Cincinnati. Because I already think that, it's a Biden plus 8 district. It's a district in which Biden, I think, did the best relative to Sherrod Brown out of all 15 of these congressional districts. And it's also worth noting that this is the first time in a while that the Cincinnati Democrats will have a chance to compete in a district. And so that, I think, will make them energized. So I think that I could see the Democrats beating Cabot either way. But, especially in a state as suburban as this, you're probably getting Democrats doing well here no matter what. But I think with Roe v. Wade, I'm really close to moving to lean D outright. So I think that they would pick up a Michigan 3 and Ohio 1, and they do better in a lot of the Virginia seats. They'd also win Colorado 8. Colorado 8 is a seat in which they did quite well in 2020, but it's still a toss for 2022 because it was still fairly close in 2020. It was still, a Trump-Biden seat, and so that would probably go for Democrats because they were talking about a scenario in which the Democratic Party it is doing well with the college-educated, white suburban voters, and Colorado 8's full of those. And so if enough voters, we don't know because, if we read the exit polls on election night in a few months from now and we see that enough voters checked abortion as their number one issue, that's good for Democrats because it means that enough change from issues like the economy or inflation or, the war in Ukraine, and that would help Democrats if that were to happen. So Colorado 8, if enough voters do shift across these districts. I think Colorado 8, Michigan 3, Virginia 2, Washington 8 are the first to move. I'm trying to think. Also Ohio 1. Pennsylvania 6 probably goes Democrat too. Like Connor Lamb, if that guy probably wishes he was running for House right now because his Senate bid looks doomed. I think Connor Lamb too would have he would have been favored to win this race no matter what. I probably would have had his tilt D if he was in the race. And so if enough voters in outer Pittsburgh, holding degrees, care about this in November, Pennsylvania 6 or Pennsylvania 17. Did I say Pennsylvania 6? I think I was saying Pennsylvania 6. I think I was getting Pennsylvania 6 because of the Biden plus 6 number, but no, Pennsylvania 6 itself is held by, I think, Chrissy Holohan, and she's going to win no matter what. But Pennsylvania 17 stays Democratic, and then there are some seats in Los Angeles that would get more Democratic. The only one that you'd be talking about because of this would probably be the 45th or 40th district. But I think the 45th is probably lean Republican. I have it as toss, but I'm going to move it to lean Republican right now because I just don't see a scenario in which the Democrats do well here. Although toss-up might be a fair rating because of Roe v. Wade, because this is a seat where the Republicans probably gain anyways due to its large Asian and Hispanic populations. But if enough of these voters do care about abortion, it probably does get moved back to toss-up. But it's a lean Republican seat right now. And then you got the 47th to 49th district, which are Mike Levin or Katie Porter and Mike Levin, and so both these seats are probably lean, likely Democrat. Levin's likely, Porter's lean, but I think that they both are pretty solid now after this ruling. And then the 40th, which is Young Kim's seat, which also I'm just noticing this now, kind of looks like this, like the country of Lao. I didn't really notice that, but it's kind of cool. It does look like Lao a little bit, but maybe that's a sign that it'll well, actually no, because Lao has both red and blue in its flag, but whatever. Enough geography jokes for the podcast. But California, I think, remains unchanged unless the Democrats do well with Asians and Hispanics in Michelle Steele's district. And then, other than that, I really think the Democrats would get a House majority out of this, because I'm giving them these seats, and they're currently, I've given them 5 new seats because of this ruling. They're still not close to a House majority. They need to win all the toss-ups, too. And then once you get past those seats, you're kind of looking at reaches, and, a reach in this case would be something like Nebraska, too. Don Bacon, it's a Biden plus 7 seat. Bacon's overperformed, though. He did win in a Biden plus 8 seat last year, and, that was with a better national environment for Democrats anyways, so the seat probably would be closer if we held a presidential election in 2022. It would probably be, a Biden plus only 1 or 2 seat, and with that, Bacon could easily just outperform by a little bit and win. So I think that is it for my House talk. The Democrats at best gain 5 seats in this, but I don't really think that they are going to be doing too much in the House as a result of this. The people who think Democrats are safe in the House, I just don't see the path where they flip 25 seats because of this. I think they flip 5, 6, but that's really it. So that's it for the House. I still got the Democrats at 201 seats, and out of 14 toss-ups, they probably do win 3 or 4 of them, but I think the majority go GOP anyways, and I think the Democrats are looking at a minority in the House a little greater than that of what the GOP has right now. So it's not a massive minority. It's not down bad or anything. But it's still it's still not a significant enough minority to cause trouble. So I do think the Democrats lose the House, but this helps them a little bit. Although I'm sure most Democrats probably aren't happy with this ruling, and I don't think they'd trade it for a potential few gains in the House. But so that is it for this episode. Takeaways here should be Roe v. Wade getting overturned helps Democrats a little bit, but not as much as you might think, just when you're looking at the map, because the House, there are so few seats this would help them, and in the Senate, unless they really start to do well in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona and Nevada, I don't think it helps them out there too much either overall. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed, if you're on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe, share with a friend. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can follow the podcast, share it with a friend. If you missed any of the previous episodes, I had Arthur Gardner on. We talked UK elections, in which, by the way, Labour Congrats to Arthur. I didn't make a prediction because me making a prediction would be horrendous because I don't know much about the UK. But I had Arthur on, and Arthur walked me through it. I kind of asked him questions. He basically explained it to me like I was 5 years old, which is helpful because I asked him questions he'd answer, and his forecast for these elections is quite good. So listen to that podcast. We also talked about the House. This is before Roe v. Wade, though. Listen to my podcast of the political election predictions, or with Evan Scrimshaw. We talked to, with Evan, we talked House and Senate. With PEP, or Tenkor, I should say, we talked Senate. And then, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Ryan Jakubowski. I tweet there. You can watch my YouTube channel. It's called Unbiased Election Predictions in History. It's the first result on YouTube. I'm currently at 5.5k subscribers. Try to get me to that. A little below right now, but try to get me to that. I only need a few more subscribers for that. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all next week.